Hello.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of 10 for the Chairman's Writer
Edition, Volume 2, with Will.i.am. So, this is where we take questions from our subscribers and, answer them, I guess.
Yeah, and do our best to answer them.
Yeah, that's usually good.
So thank you very much to the subscribers for continuing to support programs such as these for local viewers like you.
And thank you for Gora, too, for this wonderful vintage 2940 Cabernet Sauvignon. I have not drank it yet, but I am looking forward to it, even though we need better glasses, as we found out. All right, so let's just jump right into it. From Dublar Thackeray, how do you approach the act of writing/creation in regards to the lore? Do you work from an initial outline idea, either sourced from yourselves or elsewhere, and then add flesh, or do you pick a topic sans outline and see where the fancy takes you? How much of what you each write gets reviewed by the other? I'm thinking that working so closely together gives you a great opportunity to share and collaborate on most pieces.
We do, like you kind of mentioned, we do both processes where sometimes it starts from an idea from us and other times we're handed kind of a design pitch and, a designer will come to us demanding high quality lore, which we always deliver. And you can go either way really. And so we talked about that a little bit before, but probably the interesting thing that we haven't talked about is kind of how we coordinate between each other and how being in the same office is fun and helpful. Oddly enough, when I first started here, I was like slightly farther away from Dave. And
we had a smaller office, so there was not room.
And our collaboration has definitely improved now that our desks are touching.
Yes.
And
But yeah, sometimes we do take. It sort of depends on what we're doing. For the Squadron 42 based stuff, we have a very kind of not rigid, but a worked out outline that we're sort of going through and we're starting to work from, particularly because as things come online asset-wise, we're sort of jumping around. We're not writing it from start to finish, whereas something like a news dispatch, for example, which we sort of alternate on week in and week out, sometimes we'll sort of say, hey, I got an idea, I'm thinking about doing this for Tuesday's thing, what do you think? And maybe talk it over, and other times it's just sort of a, hey, I wrote this out, here's what do you think type thing. But yeah, we review all of the stuff we kind of write.
Dave definitely reads pretty much 99% of everything that goes on, so he takes his lead writer position very serious. So, it's kind of unified content through him. I don't necessarily look at everything. I try to try to read along, but it's pretty great. Oh, my turn.
Your turn.
Ajax Wilhelm. Thanks in large part to the Civil War, the life expectancy in the U.S. in the middle 1800s was roughly 40 years old. In 2014, thanks in large part to Blade Runner, Bacon, and Mario Kart 8, it's right around 80 Mario Kart 8, it's right around 80 years old. With advances in medicine, but the added danger of living in space, what's the average lifespan for a spaceman, spacewoman in the year 2944? So we've been saying 150 years.
It's sort of, that was in the early days of the sort of Ask a Dev, that was a raging discussion about age and stuff, and a lot of people think that with medical advances as they are now, that the life expectancy would be much larger than that. But I remember early on in conversations with Chris, there was this sort of, there was this idea that the universe that people should not be living beyond like 200 years, just because you start to get into immortality and wanted to have these sort of various phases of human development, and then that were sort of isolated to themselves. Like the fact that there aren't any humans that were alive during the Messer era speaks a very different thing about that era, because it's all through, historical fact and rather than personal recollection.
So we're kind of thinking, that human bodies have a shelf life as much as we can extend it. But probably what tech has done is improve the quality of those 150 years, medically speaking, like the senility and other kind of problems that come with old age have
Genetic
probably
disorders
and that kind of stuff has probably been eliminated. So you get a much fuller, healthier, full 150 years, more bang for your buck kind of thing.
Right.
Would be one way to think about it. So,
Star-Lord. I'd like to see more about human-alien relations. Are there hybrid colonies or other joint ventures? I think no for that, just because it was mostly, I think it was an art thing. I mean, you can get into, I remember there was a little bit of a discussion about this, about, you know, physiology and biology and DNA-based life forms versus other life forms and, you know, that type of thing. But at the end of the day, I think it was actually just a sort of a technical thing, like having, if you have human-alien hybrids, you have to have degrees of that. So, you know, what is a 10% hybrid? What is a 20%, 30%? You know, and it's just, it's extrapolate. It's a lot more stuff that you have to build in order to make it believable in the universe, rather than.
And hearing you talk, I'm wondering now if the question, because of relations, they're asking by hybrid colony, like Xi'an and humans building a city together.
Oh, in that regard, yeah. I mean, I think there were, you know, or even just, are there interpersonal relationships regardless of producing offspring? I mean, I would think, sure, yeah.
Yeah, I think there'll be mixed crews. I mean, Tavarin, we're hoping to have a fully integrated, even though there's some political and social issues going on with the Tavarin people, they are part of the UEE.
Right.
And then we're also talking about having, you know, ports where there's a lot of interspecies trade going on. So you'll have, you know, Banu and Xi'an and humans all living side by side in one city, and kind of seeing how that melting pot will develop would be real interesting for us to explore and develop. But basically, yeah, you're going to be able to get your Banu best friend.
BBF?
BBBFF. Tolaris. I have read a lot of awesome material on history, events, planets, and people. But what about the arts? Has the Shakespearean sonnet survived? Will I discover a haiku spray painted on walls?
I mean, I think so. I mean, I would imagine, I hope that Shakespearean sonnets survive. They're pretty awesome. But
I mean, what is music other than art? And we still have music kicking around.
It's true. And
poems just set to music, you know, man?
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. Yeah, I mean, you know, I mean, we haven't gotten into it. I mean, because I guess the thing is we've sort of made references to, and we even had a lore builder about celebrities, you know, artists and painters and stuff like that, that you guys actually provided. You know, I guess the thing that's tricky about it is, you know, if you start talking about prolific authors and poets and all that type of stuff, then you have to kind of write the stuff in order for it to exist, and that's just a lot to.
Didn't we have that art film that was going to get kicked out of the film contest? I
mean, we made a mention of a like a, not a performance artist, like an abstract artist that the Banu guy who discovered the stretch goal system was enamored with. He loved what she did. He named the system after her.
Just in the most recent lore builder, we talked about one of the pastimes that people can do is like crafts, you know, turning, you know, people are still carving and whittling and building stuff to pass the time. So
but as far as like the historical stuff too, I mean, specifically the Shakespearean sonnets, I mean, I imagine as, you know, I mean, even now, as technology has allowed us to save and preserve stuff, you know, I mean, it probably won't have the social prevalence that it would have today, but, you know, I mean, think about Homer, you know, not Simpson. Like, you know, the Odyssey is still one of the classic novels of humankind, you know, I mean, and that's survived for 3,000 years?
Yeah.
Something like that? I don't know.
It's a good book.
Good book. Good book. Bit long. From Doopsums. Coming from a huge horror fan, has the idea been tossed around for maybe finding a derelict capital ship that upon exploring has a haunted house or supernatural vibe? Think Event Horizon or Alien Isolation. And if so, has any lore been discussed that can tie in something like this? Yeah, I mean, I think it's that thing, you know, was it the Isaac Asimov quote that to the common person, technology is indistinguishable from magic? I mean, you could have something that could be conceivably, to our perspective, supernatural, that is just simply because it's outside of our current realm of understanding. But I mean, I think we're still bound within the realities of the universe that we're building, so it's not, you know, zombies.
I mean, there's definitely like ghost stories floating around in the lore.
Yeah, Hades system.
Yeah,
good example. But yeah, you know, I mean, the floating derelict ship where there's, you know, just bodies and you don't. I mean, that's a classic. You gotta at least kind of shout out to that.
There'll often be something right behind you.
Yes.
So. Bomb Squad. How has your writing focus for Star Citizen changed from the start of the project until now? And how do you see it changing in the future? When it comes to making missions or things to do in the PU, do you create the stories for them first, or do they get built based on gameplay requirements?
Huh.
Well, we'll start with the first part. How do you feel writing has changed since we have begun this crazy journey called Star Citizen?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly become much more interesting because it's, now that we're having things come online, you know, conversation systems and actual mechanics and stuff like that, like you get more of a direct plug-in of like, you need to write something for this that needs to accommodate for this system, rather than before where it was, you know, I mean, for the early news updates, I mean, we were trying to write about what the plan was for game design aspects, and now we can actually kind of write about, you know, game aspects. You know, I don't know.
I mean, the project has definitely gotten to the point now where we're starting to really focus on, you know, specific content and churning out scripts and getting things done, you know, for moving into recording stuff and really heading into production phase of things and moving out for more of our kind of brainstorming and dreaming of lore days. So that's kind of fun to see that kind of switch happen, get more focused and a lot more panicked all the time.
Yeah, a lot of panic.
So the second question, when making missions and things, do we create the stories first, or do they get based on gameplay requirements?
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point we're still building a lot of the mechanics around the PU, so we haven't gotten into specific mission stuff.
Tony and the guys have been doing a lot of experimentation with figuring out, like, without the story applied on top of it, just how the missions work from getting the player from here to here. And so we're going to, once they sort of have a handle on that, we'll be able to dive back in and start building up with stories and how to tie it into this bartender and going to this, you know, system and, you know, what are you carrying that's interesting.
And yeah, but I mean, maybe once the process gets sort of equalized, you know, it might be a half and half type thing if we come up with something based on, because we have a better understanding of how it could be implemented. You know, we could theoretically pitch ideas and they could just pitch stuff back to us and go, hey, we have this new thing could you do a mission for it? So it's probably going to be a bit more, even right now we're sort of taking cues from them as to how they see that sort of mechanic working out.
Yeah, and we'll come in more definitely on those missions that are going to be designed to kind of twist your expectations or be a spin on kind of the normal everyday missions. And that's where we'll come in. And with Squadron 42, even though you didn't ask, with that, it's kind of, that's kind of more, we start with a very high level story that kind of sets the initial roadmap down of where we're going narratively, and then the designers take that and kind of plan locations and more specifics of gameplay, and then they pitch that back to us and we take it and we start saying like, oh, well, that's interesting. If they're going to be in a fight right before they have this big heartfelt talk, then maybe we can adjust the fight. Maybe rather than being a big battle, we make it just a one-on-one fight with this guy because it'll be more impactful, and design says no, that won't work. How about 3 guys? And so that kind of finding that beautiful middle ground between gameplay and narrative.
From Nostromo 1977, will the writing team make a conscious effort to include a little humor in Star Citizen? It would be awesome to see a few NPCs with comedic personalities. Some humor could be subtle, some witty one-liners, and some could make a tense situation lighter with some well-timed comedy. Definitely, yeah. I mean, I think that...
I was going to say maybe.
I was going to go definitely. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it's important to remember, I mean, as long as it's not... There's a weird thing with humor. I've always looked at it as... it's great to have funny people in it, and because you can have funny people in a serious environment. Like Hudson from Aliens is always my sort of classic go-to example. Like, he's a funny character who's in a very serious situation, and he takes the seriousness of the situation seriously, but he reacts to it in a funny way because he has a dynamic personality. But yeah, I mean, I think you need that, you know. And I was actually talking with Chris about this last week. Was, you know, he was like, you know, if you have too much, if it's too monotone and too, you know, dark and angry and violent the entire time, it gets overwhelming and it feels flat. You need kind of levity to kind of punctuate the darkness. And, you know, it's one of the great things about Firefly too. Is, I mean, that's a show that can get very dark and get really violent. And part of it is because you have that warmth of the comedy that to counterbalance it. So it can, when it gets dark, it feels really dark and really bleak because you have these big personalities who are scared.
Yeah, and I think it just kind of, I try not to, when I'm writing a lighter, funnier moment, not to have the characters poke holes in the world or make fun of the world, but rather have the humor come from a place with inside the story and evolve out of that. Because, you know, it can be an easy joke sometimes, or the more obvious one, to be like, isn't this stupid that we're doing this? Isn't it stupid that I have to go get this box?
Right.
But then you're just kind of shooting yourself in the foot rather than trying to build up to something.
Yeah.
But yeah, one of your wingmen will just have a horn that he honks as you're flying around.
Yeah. He's got really big shoes.
Actually, I kind of really like that. Like a harpo as a wingman.
It's like, cover my 6. I got your back.
Oh no, one long, two short. Captain R. Mason, what are some political parties within each government? Is there a small group in the Banu that would like to cease trade with humans, or something like our modern day political parties and governments?
So at the moment for the humans, we have 3 political parties that we've established. There's the Universal Party, Centralist Party, and the Transitionalist Party. We haven't really gotten into the alien ones yet. Specifically the Banu one.
Well, we're not ready to talk about it quite yet, but basically though, because we want to have a lot of variety in the things that you can do in the pew, you can always be ensured to, whether it's not a majority of the population believes something, you know,
right.
I'm sure there is a group of Banu that would like to cut off trade from the humans, whether it's just 2 guys on a ship and they're trying to sabotage this other thing, you know, like that. It all comes down to, we want to have the full rainbow of beliefs. It's always just about how many people believe that weird thing. Like the more fringe the belief is, the less people you'll run into in the universe that believe it.
But, you know, it could be one of those things that, is it something that could happen down the line? Maybe, but they would have to grow in power, or something would have to happen that would, you know, shift them or something like that. But
yeah, and I'm sure there's just as many humans who want to cut off trade with the Banu and the other things, as we covered in a recent news update.
Right.
The party that I want to join is the After Party.
Hey-o. From Amontillado, do you anticipate allowing players to contribute to the ongoing lore of the verse with flavor items like the recent drinks and clothing lore builders once the game goes live?
Probably. I mean, we're kind of getting to the point where we have so much of stuff that, you know, that we might hold off on it for a little bit. You know, I don't know why I'm saying this, but yeah, I assume we're going to continue that practice of, when we need things, of looking to you, the backers, to help us fill in the universe. Like we said, once the PU goes live, a lot of, you know, the Galactipedia stuff is going to be filled in by your actions and what you're doing. So,
I
mean, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, I mean, the thing is, what I'm wondering is, like, if once the game is full live, if but just how you divide between the, you know, if we're going to be doing this sort of daily content updates that we do. I don't know.
Yeah, well, mine does not be so formalized, and we might not need as many because we're already live.
And it's already functioning, and, you know.
So it just might take on a different form, but I assume, I mean, it's one of our stated goals to have you, the community, affect the game, and affecting the lore is part of that. So, Trent Hawkins, what is the lore approach to nukes and other weapons of mass destruction? It's been 900 years, and I can't help but look at a Miss or Retaliator and imagine all the forbidden technology, treaties, and regulations that are behind still having explosion-based missiles.
I mean, I'm not sure if nukes are a specific missile payload or not. I don't remember. That's a design.
I mean, There's definitely been talk about having nuclear payloads. I'm not sure
Yeah.
where that's going to end up. But
I mean, the funny thing is that at the end of the day, I mean, it is interesting. I mean, this is a society where common people can go out and buy really heavily armed warships, you know, in a nutshell. I mean, fighters and stuff like that. So it's a bit of a different society. I mean, mostly that's just because it's dangerous out there. You know, there are vandal, there are pirates, there are slavers. There's all sorts of kind of craziness happening outside that you'd have to protect yourself.
The space is too big to police fully with
Yeah.
with a unified force.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, as far as nukes, I mean, specifically, I think that's more of a design thing. I would imagine that that I would have, you know, if you're, I mean, you've seen the size of these frigates. I mean, they're huge. You would have to use some kind of, you know, nuclear payload to put a dent in that thing. I mean,
it's interesting because we have the notion of mil-spec weapons. Like when we release a
Right.
military ship to civilians, we say that they don't include everything. So we have this line of there being some technology that's too powerful, too dangerous,
Right.
or that the military wants to contain an advantage over the civilian population.
Oh yeah.
So
definitely.
that's implying that there is a certain level of devastation that's considered inappropriate for commercial
Public use,
use.
yeah.
And in order to get that, you start having to go to the black market. So like an off-the-shelf ship made by a major manufacturer wouldn't really have any forbidden tech in there because they wouldn't
Yeah.
want to lose their manufacturer license or put themselves in the wrong end of the what the hell am I saying? They wouldn't want to lose their manufacturing license.
Yeah.
And so
So there is a line. It's just, you know, what that definition of the line is. Because the thing also, I mean, you know, I mean, part of the devastation of nuclear weapons is atmosphere. You know, I mean, radiation, fallout, air carrying particles beyond the blast radius and the fallout zone and all that stuff. So, which you don't really get in space.
yeah,
I
just
would
being
imagine.
in space is like awful for you radiation-wise.
Yeah. So, you know, maybe nukes lose a little bit of their luster. I mean, you know, obviously, I don't think it's restricted to nukes. I don't think you could, you know, try and do an orbital strike on a planet. They would shoot you down in a second. But yeah, so I guess it's a long way around. Yes, there's a line because, as Will said, there's the mil-spec thing, but what that division is, I think we're still sort of trying to figure out. And a part of that is also just with game balance. You know, I mean, with Arena Commander, you know, there's a huge amount of focus put on making sure that what weapon does what and is countered by what and what are its strengths and weaknesses and stuff like that. And so just getting a baseline understanding of what civilian weapons do, then you could figure out what the mil-spec weapons do and why they're so much more powerful.
Yeah, and just like we're going to have to handle you walking around with weapons on a planet's surface, I think it'll be the same way of like when you're flying into, you know, ArcCorp and you have a nuclear payload missile, you know, we'll have to figure out ways where you're not firing 5 of them off into the middle of a city.
Right.
Not sure what, but something to think about.
Yeah.
I don't-
So that's it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
again,
everyone.
and it wouldn't be possible without the wonderful help of the subscribers and to all our backers out there. Thank you, and a happy holidays.
See you next time.